Need a little luxury in your life? That's why I recently treated myself to a staycation at the Inn at 500 Capital. Whether you're looking for a romantic getaway, a special celebration, or just a break from routine, you're going to love their Four Diamond Boutique experience with gorgeous rooms, penthouses, and suites right in the heart of downtown Boise. You'll be greeted with a complimentary drink on arrival, have access to free shuttle service, and even your pet is welcome. And here's an insider tip: book more than one night and save with their weekend escape rate. Book your stay now at inat500.com. Today on CityCast Boise. Idaho's school choice bill is heading to the governor's desk after Trump publicly supported it. Meanwhile, a bill that would repeal Medicaid expansion and leave thousands of Idahoans without health care is gaining traction. And which bill should get the chop? Mandatory cursive, free speech zones, or truck nuts? It's Monday, February 24th. I'm Lindsay Van Allen, and this is what Boise's talking about. Welcome back to another week with the Idaho legislature in session. Joining me today is James Dawson, political reporter with Boise State Public Radio, to break down what's going on. So thanks so much for being here today, Jimmy.
Yeah, you're welcome. It's another wonderful Monday.
Let's jump into what has been, I think, really the topic of most conversation, which is that the school choice or voucher tax credit bill has passed the House. It has passed the Senate. Is it at the governor's desk? What's going on now with that bill? Where's it at in the ether?
There's a lot of weird bureaucratic things that happen, so it's not like as soon as the Senate passes it, it immediately hits his desk. But yes, it's on its way or is there right now, depending on, when you're listening to this. And he has three options, basically. He can sign it into law, he could veto it, or he could let it pass into law without his signature. So right now, his office is kind of in data collection mode. They've opened up the phone lines for people to call and leave a message or just straight up push a button and say, veto this or sign it, just so they can kind of get a temperature of where people stand on this. Another data point for that is Boise State University's annual statewide public policy survey that shows, far more people. It's in the 50% plus category of people who do not like these types of legislation. Taxpayer dollars going to subsidize private school tuition versus in the 30-something% of people who do support it. So there's a pretty wide gap there. He also can fall back on, what he said in his State of the State address. He wanted any sort of school choice, private school subsidy bill to be, quote, fair, responsible, transparent, and accountable, which is something that got repeatedly brought up in debate.
I'm really curious what you think, because like you said, poll after poll have shown that Idahoans are not in favor of this. Idaho homeschool groups came out not in favor of it. Several private schools came out saying, this isn't really maybe the bill for us. Different Idaho education groups and unions came out against this bill. But President Trump specifically championed this bill on Truth Social and said that he wanted to see it passed. How much of an impact do you think that had on the legislature?
Oh, I mean, I think it certainly had an effect. And just to be fair to your earlier statements, individual homeschooling parents did support this. The overall main organization did oppose it, just worried that it would increase regulation on homeschooling in Idaho, which currently there really isn't any regulation. Lots of private schools testified in favor of it, too, like the Roman Catholic Diocese in Boise. You had Coal Valley Christian School, several others, including, current private school students who wanted their parents to get that tax credit. But yeah, I certainly think that anytime the president of the United States weighs in on a bill, it's going to at least turn some heads at the state legislative level and probably at the, in the executive branch as well.
And I'm really curious what you think. There were lots of conversations about transparency, about, accountability with this money, because we've seen in other states where they pass voucher bills or some kind of tax credit, and then the cost of that just balloons within a year or two far beyond the bounds of what it initially was supposed to be. And Republicans came out. I mean, Senator Cook from Idaho Falls said, we don't get to decide where this money is going. It's already gone. We don't decide where it comes out of. And that's been something that opponents have brought up, that where is this money coming from? It can't come from public education. And so what other budget is getting rated for this money? And that, he was pretty explicit. The legislature isn't going to have a lot of say about that. It's just going to come out of another budget. Do you think the overall feeling at the Capitol was that this bill is transparent, or just there's so much momentum behind it, it's going to get passed?
Oh, I think that there was just a ton of momentum, because this has been going on for, years and years and years. I mean, millions and millions of dollars have been spent by outside groups to, support legislative candidates who would vote the way that they wanted to, or that's maybe a little too cynical, they have the same ideas about what would be a good idea for education in Idaho, right? They align on those sorts of ideological points. So I think the momentum was certainly there. I also think that there was enough opposition. Neither the House or the Senate passed this by a veto-proof margin. So really, this is resting at the hands of Governor Brad Little. If he vetoes it, it's going to be a huge task to overturn it and override it, which it just doesn't seem likely. Maybe in the House. In the Senate, though, they'd need to pick up 6 or 7 votes, and it certainly doesn't seem like those are there.
Okay, like you said, Jimmy, there were 9 Republican senators that sided with the Democrats to oppose this bill. In his State of the State, Governor Little said he did want to see some kind of a school choice voucher bill. Do you think it's likely he'll veto this, or do you think that he's going to sign it?
It's always hard to predict these things, but just going by what he said during his State of the State address, which again, he wanted something fair, responsible, transparent, and accountable. Transparency, certainly as a definition, was pretty malleable for lawmakers. The supporters of this bill just say ultimately accountability lies with the parents. If they think their kid is getting a good education at whatever private school they happen to, enroll in with this tax credit, then that should be good enough, as opposed to making them take some standardized tests and showing that they are actually mastering or at least grasping whatever kind of subject that they're being tested on. But at least, as an observer, that doesn't seem to gel with what Governor Brad Little in the past has said counts for him as transparent and accountable. Transparency, again, is another huge one. And I think that he would have plenty of leeway to lean on these words that he spoke, on January 6th.
Okay, so for anyone who is listening, has feelings about this, wants to be involved, wants to make their voice heard, what can they do at this point? Is it call the governor's office? Are there other ways to make their voice heard?
Yeah, you want to call the governor's office. They're taking kind of like a tallying count of how many people want him to sign it, how many want him to veto it. That phone number, if you're so interested, no matter which side you're on, is 208-334-2100. And I actually just got an email from the governor's press secretary this morning saying that they are taking, comments from Idaho residents, 1 per Idaho resident, and you can also leave a message or speak to a staff member, like say if you have a phone number that's not a 208 number. I don't know if that would get garbled up in the system, but that might be how you have to do it too.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. I don't know if you knew this, but anyone can get the same premium wireless for $15 a month plan that I've been enjoying. It's not just for celebrities. So do like I did and have one of your assistant's assistants switch you to Mint Mobile today. I'm told it's super easy to do at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
Empower. Claire is practicing her breathing for her upcoming yoga retreat in Bali. Has she ever done yoga before? No. But Claire worked with Empower on her savings and investment strategy. She got good at money, so she can be a little bad. Empower. Invest well, live a little. Join our 19 million customers today at empower.com.
Past performance is not indicative of future returns. Investing involves risks. You may lose money. Advisory services are provided for a fee by Empower Advisor Group, LLC, EAG, a registered investment advisor with the Securities and Exchange Commission. Om Namaste.
All right. And I want to give everyone just a little heads up. We have been doing the date, marry, kill, but that's kind of tricky to do with bills because you don't really date a bill, at least not any bill in Idaho. But we're changing it just slightly. So it's the same idea, but we're using the terms sign, redraft, and table. So what bill would I sign? Which one would I redraft? We need to fix this one a little bit. It's, there's some things. And then which one would I table? It's done. It's in the drawer. It's not coming out. It's dead. Okay. So Jimmy, what are my options this week?
This week, well, one of the favorite ones that I've seen around on social media and just talking to a bunch of people is an update to the indecent exposure law. This is targeting concerns that Representative Jeff Cornilles heard about the Canyon County Pride event last year, where some folks were wearing pasties to cover their nipples, which is allowed under city code. But basically, you couldn't display any sort of breasts that are showing the nipple, even if they are hormonally changed.
Or surgery. It also was surgically.
Yes, or surgically altered to look like developing or fully developed female breasts, right? But then also no toys or products that resemble male or female genitalia, which, as Democratic Representative Todd Achilles pointed out, that means truck nuts. So I feel like this is a lot of people would support that. People who think truck nuts are ridiculous. I've heard from several of them, but also a lot of people want to defend their right to display those truck nuts. So that's one of them. Then you also have a kind of an update. It's been sort of a trend around the country that we want to make sure our kids know how to read and write cursive. Just so a lot of the argument is we have a bunch of founding documents from the 17 and 1800s. And if you want to read those primary source documents, many of them are not electronically, cataloged or transcribed into regular font. So if you want to read those, you got to learn how to do it. And you got to do that by 5th grade under this bill. And then the third one is eliminating free speech zones on college campuses. For anyone who hasn't been to college for a while, common practice is a college will set up, one or two or like a handful of areas on the college campus where people can kind of reserve a time and go and talk about whatever they want to students as they're walking by, whether that's, pro or anti-abortion. That's a pretty common one. Or lots of church groups and missionaries, right, want to kind of recruit people to get into their flock. So this would make it so those people could go anywhere on campus and hand out literature or try to talk to students. So Lindsay, where are you at on truck nuts? This is the burning question that I have.
You know what? I might surprise people. I'm not opposed to it because then I know everything I need to know about that person. Like you're a very specific person if you've put truck nuts on your truck. And now I know who you are. And thank you for identifying yourself. So many thoughts. I think an easy one for me is I'm going to sign the cursive bill. This is again, could we focus on things that matter even, these are the things that matter so little. They're why are we wasting time? We're paying legislators to do these things that don't matter really at all. So sure, let's sign it. I don't such a non-issue. I'll give you a win, Senator Tammy Nichols. For once, never again. Don't count on that again. For the redraft, I am going to redraft the free speech zones at colleges.
How so? What do you want to do?
So I don't want to get rid of the free speech zones. I think having those spaces, especially like I went to Boise State, and as I was walking to college or like walking to classes, there was one specific spot where I knew they were going to have like the preachers and the like giant billboards with fetal parts that are all torn apart, trying to be, shocking. And so if I didn't want to deal with that at that time, I could just go another way. Or it was just like a small place to have to be there. So I do think those are good. What I would rewrite is the bill also includes a prohibition on security fees based on like the content of the expression, and the requirement for institutions to maintain policies against student-on-student harassment. And I think that is a huge problem. We saw how with recent protests in recent years, if you don't have security, like just however you feel about a topic, it should be safe to protest what you want to protest. You should be able to do that without fear of student-on-student harassment. And depending on the content of what you are protesting, there should be some amount of security if that is a concern. And so I would get rid of that part of the bill, and I just get rid of, change the part, be like, JK, I'm rewriting this. We do want the free speech zones, but we also need security, and there should be protection against student-on-student harassment if you are exercising your First Amendment rights. So I'm redrafting that one. It would basically be taking all the teeth out of what they want to do.
But you want to keep the no fees for security, basically, like because that's also a thing where you know the administration will be like, hey, yeah, you can hold this event on campus, but you need to pony up a couple grand to hire security and barricades and stuff like that. You would say, not college, you got to take care of that.
Yes. Yep. That's like, if it's happening there should be security. That should, if your ability to protest shouldn't be dependent on whether you have thousands of dollars to protest. That's pretty unconstitutional or un-American in my perspective. But you should also be safe from student-on-student harassment. And I do want you in specific zones. Okay. And then I am tabling the truck nuts bill. As much as I think some people would be really happy for that to go away, I'm tabling it because I just feel like there is so much room for malicious compliance in this bill. I mean, like it says hormonally or surgically altered breasts. How are we supposed to judge? As a concerned citizen, am I just going to call every day? Because I don't really know. How am I supposed to know? There is no enforcement for this. This is ridiculous. This is like, it's targeting such a non-issue. I'm sorry, if you have an issue with pasties, like there are like raves and things that happen around this valley. Is that going to cover that too? Like this is going to turn around into such a thing that they're not prepared to deal with. And like, it's just it's so ridiculous at this point, and clearly meant to target pride events and the LGBTQ community, particularly the trans community. And I'm so done with it. So I'm tabling it.
I've just got to say that you probably made the day of, our mutual friend Heath Drusen, whose rear bike light is a blinking pair of bike nuts. Just so you know.
Oh, Heath. Okay, Jimmy, we have talked about this before, but there has been some movement on the bill to essentially repeal Medicaid expansion. So what's going on there, and how involved should people be now that, this bill has passed the House?
Yeah. And since you say essentially repeal Medicaid, I think one of the best quotes from that floor debate was Minority Leader Alana Rubel saying she had a better chance of flying a unicorn to the moon and back than, Medicaid expansion not being repealed under this bill. So, yeah, just a quick refresher. There are 11 different conditions under this, 10 of which would need federal waivers to actually go into place. We're talking about things like work requirements. You could only spend up to 3 years during your entire life on Medicaid expansion, and there would be enrollment caps, things like that. It did pass the House. This is something that even a lot of Republicans had heartburn over just because they didn't see a path forward, really, of getting this passed. The federal waiver process, really, by the deadline, which would be July 2026. So it's now going to the Senate, where people will have another chance to weigh in and tell state senators to vote for it or vote against it.
And just to clarify, because there's a lot going on with this bill. If these conditions are not in place and functional by July 2026, it would repeal the expansion. So that's what we're facing, is they put all of these conditions on it, and if somehow it's not functional by that time, which is a huge ask, that is a major ask, it would just go away. In my perspective, it's trying to pretend like, no, we want to give Medicaid expansion a chance, which, for the record, was overwhelmingly passed by voters in Idaho. They supported it by a large margin. That it feels like it's trying to be like, no, we want it to stay in place, but actually there's no way in hell you can meet all these requirements. So it will be repealed, but just an outright repeal has not been popular. So it feels like a sneaky way to repeal it.
Which is what opponents have said on the floor, in committee, in public comments, et cetera. The other thing to note, too, is if by some way they do meet those 11 requirements, if at any time even just one of them falls out of compliance, then it is repealed. I think it's within 60 or 90 days afterwards. So basically, you have to keep 100% compliance in perpetuity for the rest of time for Medicaid expansion to continue to exist in Idaho under that bill.
Let me know if I'm thinking about this the right way, but to meet these requirements would necessarily require more bureaucracy. You're going to need more people to keep track of these things, to keep track of these requirements. Like, there's so much to keep track of, it would be impossible to place it on the current organization. So not only would we be getting rid of Medicaid for Idahoans.
Medicaid expansion.
Yeah, Medicaid expansion for Idahoans. We would not have a catastrophic fund, which we previously had to fund because those people don't suddenly not need health care. They just use the ER because they don't have established care. And then there would also be additional costs in trying to maintain all of these requirements. Like, this is, for the party of fiscal responsibility, this is not very fiscally responsible or conservative of them.
Well, and then you have rural hospitals and clinics whose patients, are largely poor and have a lot of Medicaid expansion participants in them, where, those hospitals, they say, could, either reduce services or even cease to exist. They were in real trouble back before Medicaid expansion for those similar reasons, right? And yeah, just to expand on the catastrophic healthcare fund that you mentioned, that's basically if a person gets a big cancer diagnosis, can't pay for it, they go and get all the treatment that they can and kind of rack up a bunch of medical debt. They pay $10,000 of it, and then they apply to their county, and then the state comes in and is like, yeah, okay, you met the requirements. We'll cover the rest of your medical bills so you don't have to go into bankruptcy. That's what was in place before. That got repealed, and there's no bill right now to reinstate any kind of similar program. So
if we get rid of Medicaid expansion, we will be leaving Idahoans with a gaping hole of no Medicaid expansion and no safety net at all if something catastrophic happens to Idaho. Like, this feels like a bill for somebody who hates Idahoans who, have health concerns. Like, that's really what it almost feels malicious.
I mean, I can't speak to that. You have Jordan Redmond saying that he still wants this to be available for the neediest Idahoans, which is why, cap it at 50,000 or, by some estimates, 30-ish thousand, depending on how you want to do the math. But he just views it as, a budget monster that's just going to keep gobbling up state dollars at a, unsustainable rate.
as a nurse, this is going to create such a mess for Idahoans. It's not going to save money. And so many people have come out to explain why this would not save Idahoans any money. Medicaid expansion is the conservatively, when people are like, oh, I'm conservatively fiscal, whatever, this is the better fiscal policy. Medicaid expansion is saving the state money. Getting rid of it is wild if you want to say that you're trying to save money. That the math is not mathing.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see if this does pass the Senate, what Governor Brad Little's going to do, given just the fact that almost 62% of Idahoans approved it in 2018. Massively popular. It's currently in the current fiscal year, $82.2 million of the state share going to Medicaid expansion, which is like 10% of the overall Medicaid budget state share across the 4 programs. So, it's not, in the grand scheme of things, not a ton of money. It's a significant amount of money. You can do a lot with $82 million, but, the math seems to be that, yeah, it's saving the state money and is essentially paying for itself.
Well, Jimmy, thank you so much. There is so much happening. Things are moving quickly through the State House. So I really appreciate you taking the time to break things down and keep us updated on what's happening and how we can get involved.
Happy to do it, Lindsay.
That's all for today here on CityCast Boise. If you enjoyed the show, share it with your friends so they can call the governor's office too. We'll be back tomorrow morning with the wildest 1-star reviews of iconic local institutions. Catch you then.